Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting episode of the Jack the Lad podcast. On today's episode we've got on Andy Torbet. Welcome.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's much appreciated. Scrolling through your Instagram is almost just like you're a real life action man, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're scrolling through Instagram. I realised the other day that I've not updated my website in about 4 years because I think everyone uses like social media now rather than websites, but I probably should get a grip of that. So not the first person to say that, which is awesome because I was as a kid. I think we're just chatting about this before we start recording. Like we both had Action Man, and I used to collect most of the diving stuff. But I had the chance a few years ago to be the voice of Action Man. So, how many years ago was it now? I don't know, it's pre-COVID anyway. It's before how it's all judged as all, pre or post-COVID, but it was pre-COVID, about 2017, I think, maybe 18. Anyway, and I was doing little documentary short films for the one show, like cave diving stuff, free diving, skydiving, whatever. And they called me up and said, "Oh, we're making a film about the 50th anniversary of Action Man." And I was like, "Oh God, that'd be awesome. I'd love to present that." And they said, "No, we've already made it." So I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm not entirely sure why you're calling me." So the premise was what they'd done is they'd used stop animation and they'd taken an Action Man and basically he kind of escaped from a secondhand toy shop and he'd gone out into the world to investigate his own story. So he was going to the original factory and he was chatting to like the guys that invented Action, all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of, he was presenting it, but so we need a voice for him. So would you mind coming to the BBC studios in Cardiff and doing voiceover, being the voice of Action Man, which obviously I was like, "Oh mate, 100%. Doesn't matter when it is, I'll cancel everything." And quite a few people have said just then, "Yeah, but you can't be Action Man because you're Scottish." And I'm like, "Yeah, but my Action Man was Scottish." Yeah. Like your Action Man talks in whichever voice the young lad had at the time. So I was like, well, my Action Man was Scottish. So I was for one brief moment, I was the voice of Action Man.
Yeah. How many lines did you have with that?
Oh, it was quite a lot. He wasn't there all day. I mean, yeah, it was quite a hefty script because he was effectively, sort of inverted commas, he was like the presenter, sort of the narrator anyway of this little story. So yeah, it was a full day in the studio. So
obviously you've mentioned there, you with the BBC. I want to jump back in time to you as a sort of a younger man. Mm-hmm. Where did it all start?
Very good question. That's never even been put like that before. I mean, I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland, East Highlands. So, it's not that I got certainly from the point of view of getting into the outdoors. I didn't get into the outdoors like a lot of people might do if they grew up in like towns and cities, because my dad was a forester. My mum was the cleaner in a castle because up there it is. The Highlands back then was pretty feudal, so you didn't really have the class system you might do down in England like that, or southern Scotland. You had the laird who lived in a castle and then owned a massive estate, and then you'd everyone who worked in the estate. That was pretty much how it went. So all about J.R.R. Tolkien. So yeah, it was rivers, lochs, forests, hills. That's just where I lived. That was it. And then I think also my dad's side of the family were all coal miners. My mum's side were farm workers. And after we were around, I must have been like 7 or 8 at the time when all the coal mines were being closed down in the UK. And I remember like my dad, all my uncles and aunties and cousins and that from my dad's side were all out of work. They're all made redundant, and there's no more work around. And one of the ways of getting out was to join the forces. But also, me and my brother collected Action Men. We always wanted to be soldiers. We had the posters up. We followed the Falklands War, even though I was like 5 or 6 at the time. So, we're always going to, I think, go down that route. That was a way of, seeing the world, seeing adventure, all that stuff. I mean, the world's changed now. It's opened up a lot more. Things like social media, for a start, has opened people's eyes to what is possible. But, the things I'm doing now would never have occurred to me that is a job. When I was that age, it was kind of go and work on a farm, I don't know, go offshore onto oil rigs, join the army, work in the coal mines before they shut down. That was kind of your options. So yeah, we were always going to join the forces. That was kind of what we were going to do.
So what branch of the forces did you join?
So I started. I was in the Marines, and then I injured my spine quite badly, and they thought I was unfixable, which is absolutely a fair conclusion to make. I managed to transfer to the army in the engineers, and then got myself sort of medically fit again. Went in P Company, did the para course, was airborne for a while, did the dive course. And then ended up most of my time in bomb disposal. So I was underwater bomb disposal and airborne bomb disposal. And then I was also part of the Maritime Counter-Terrorist Group, which is made up of a number of different assets from the sort of Special Forces, Marines, and the Fleet Air Arm and the Army. And then I did the usual tours. I had a really good time. Like, I absolutely loved my time in the force. Like, especially EOD, because we were on like back in the day when you had pages, when pages were a thing. I was on 3 hours notice to move for about 2 years, and I loved it. It's it's a single man's life, but I absolutely loved it.
Oh yeah, definitely. My old man was EOD in the RAF.
Yeah.
Bomb disposal.
It's combined course. When I did my EOD course, there's guys from the Army, the Navy, the mine clearance divers, and the RAF guys. We all do the same EOD course, which I think at the time had the highest failure rate of any course in the British forces. I think that was non-special forces, but because the failure rate, it's all academic. In the sense, there's no the usual beastings that you get in a lot of these hard courses, like Commando course or the dive course or P Company. It's just academically very difficult. It's high pressure. The test week is designed to be psychologically very, very, very high pressure, and rightfully so, because clearly there's a certain psychology that's required to defuse bombs or IEDs or whatever. And also, it's very much pass or fail, which again is reflective of the real world, because if you make a mistake, then the outcome is fairly binary.
It's literally life or death.
Yeah. So certainly when I was in, I think the course has slightly developed and changed since I left, but at the time it was a very high failure rate and it was very, very high pressure all the way through, which makes the course not maybe always pleasant to be on, but I can certainly see the sense in it.
Once you'd left the military, what did you go into, and why did you leave the military?
So I kind of I left when I turned 30. We tend to hemorrhage people around that age in the forces, because that tends to be when, regardless of whether you're an NCO or commissioned officer, that's when you start stepping back from the coalface, being a warrant officer or a major, whatever it is. And a lot of guys, they don't join for that. It's still a good life, it's a good job, all that sort of stuff. But I never joined to do that, and I was very lucky actually. I managed to keep the last few years I was kind of sidestepped because of the specialist qualifications I had. I managed to sort of stay in role rather than kind of step up another gear. And but it was one of those things. You've got to move up to make space for people behind you, and you get a bit older, so you can't just stay in place forever, no matter how much you love what you're doing. So yeah, I left and thought, right, I'm gonna become the next Jacques Cousteau or the next Ranulph Fiennes. And it turns out people won't just pay you to go and have adventures. Surprisingly, it was a bit of a shock, that. But what I learned was that you can at least make a living from sort of adventure projects and expeditions and exploration if you can communicate it when you return. And that's not really a new thing. I mean, back in Victorian times, that's what they did. When they came back from these expeditions to the Nile or wherever it was, they'd have talks at the RGS in London, and they'd do speaking tours, basically. And they'd write books, so they'd write various pieces for the papers. And that's how they sort of made their living from it, those sort of things. And things haven't really changed now. Now, the only real thing is that, you've got, well, when I first started, it was very much, social media didn't exist. This is pre-Facebook. This is how far back it was. And magazines were still a big thing. I mean, there's still magazines around, but you got paid like 3 or 4 times as much as you would do now for a magazine article. So I realised that, okay, I need to learn how to take a photograph, I need to learn how to tell a story, I need to learn how to write. And obviously, initially, it's costing you more to do these projects than you're going to make from them. So I did a bit of commercial diving, a little bit of outdoor stuff, because I was a mountaineering instructor and all that sort of stuff, and Sea-Cat guide. But most of what I did was the ex-forces market, working in Afghan and Pakistan and West Africa, doing bits and bobs, and a few jobs back in the UK. But and that earned me enough money to then, when I had time off, because often you'd be working for sort of 6 weeks away, 4 weeks back, whatever it was, to go and do these little projects and expeditions. And because of all the things I do, diving is what I do best. So I thought, right, that's where I'll, no one owes me a living. No one knows me any favors. I'm not a journalist, but at that time, I wasn't like the best cave diver, the best technical diver, best free diver in the world. So I was like, I've got to have an idea that's different, something that no one else is doing. So I had a friend of mine who's an ex-bootneck, an ex-Royal Marine, who's a diver as well. And I said, right, I've got this idea. There's this thing that, in case the listeners don't know, there's a thing called the Three Peaks Challenge, which is you basically run up, or what, but basically run up the highest mountain in Scotland, England, Wales, and drive between them all and do it all in 24 hours. I said, right, we'll raise some money for a military charity, and we'll do a thing called the Three Lakes Challenge, where you hump dive kit up to the highest loch in Scotland, the highest lake in England, and the highest glen in Wales, all within 24 hours. And you dive those bodies of water. And it's still going on. There's still teams. There's still like teams of British divers. It's become a bit of a thing. It's not, I think it's been 2 or 3 dozen teams have done it now in the last kind of 10 years. But yeah, that was my idea. So I pitched it to, I knocked on the door of a dive magazine, and the biggest one in the UK at the time. So, right, this is my idea. And the editor, in fact, I spoke to the editor just last week at the dive show. We're still friends. And he said, brilliant. Okay, can you take a photograph? And I was like, no. He said, right, take somebody with you who can. He said, because it was one of the best pieces of advice I got. He said, if you take good photographs, we're fine. If you can't write, it doesn't matter. I'm an editor. I can fix that. But if your photos are rubbish, we're done for. So yeah, I went and we did that thing, wrote an article, got it published, and he went, right, any more ideas? And I was like, again, thinking about alternative stuff. So diving in river. I went, yep, no one dives in rivers. Cool. But I went off and did it on my own. So he says, right, he lent me his professional camera and housing and all that sort of setup to go and do this. And that was the second article. That led into more articles. That gave me the sort of credibility to then write for kind of more outdoor climbing magazines and skydiving magazines. I started then doing talks at outdoor festivals, well, actually diving shows and diving festivals, which then got me into outdoor shows, and that got you talks. That gets a little bit of sponsorship. That all helps. And that all grows, and then I started a little bit of filmmaking, mostly just grabbing clips when I was in a lot of the solo adventures to help with talks, to show a little 60-second clip to show what I'm talking about. And that developed a bit more filmmaking. And at the same time, I started doing a lot more stuff in TV from a safety side. I'm doing a lot of safety diving, climbing safety, all that sort of stuff. Knew a lot of directors and cameramen at the BBC Natural History Unit, doing a lot of wildlife films. And I was pitching ideas, and then that kind of takes us into the front of camera TV work. But yeah, so that brings up to that point. It's a whistle stop tour.
So it seems pretty eventful since you've left. I mean, I've spent 11 years in the military. I did 5 years in the army and then 6 years in the RAF. So I knew when you said bootneck, I knew, but I was glad that you did clarify for obviously the listeners. So how long did that take you to do the not the 3 peaks, your three
lakes?
The 3 lakes.
24 hours. We gave ourselves 24 hours because we're stopping to film it and take photographs along the way. So we kind of, I think we did it in 23 hours and 20 minutes. I mean, a lot of teams have done it a lot quicker than that. But we were stopping to say to kind of do the whole media thing along the way. So but we set ourselves a deadline of 24 hours, which still exists now.
Yeah, nice. So you've spoke obviously quite a lot about obviously your diving, which is something I don't know much about. When you sort of first started getting into diving, like what was it about diving that you found sort of so interesting?
Frustratingly, I don't know, because I was into diving before I can remember. My mum used to tell me stories of me like stripping down my pants and swimming across the carpet whenever, like, the Man from Atlantis with Patty Duffy would come on, or any. I used to love watching all the underwater kind of naturalistic stuff that David Attenborough used to do. And this is like 4 or 5 years old. Again, I collected all the Action Man diving stuff. And I was growing up in the Highlands. We weren't anywhere near the sea, but for some reason that was just, I don't know where it first started from, but it carried on. So I learned to dive at quite a young age. When we moved into Aberdeen, the local dive club back then, it was the annual membership for a junior was £7 a year, and it was 50p a week pool fees. And sort of paper round, and that paid for it. I just went and joined the club, and I became a bit of a sort of club mascot because, like, my mum didn't dive, so it was just this 12-year-old kid rocked up to the dive club one evening at swimming pool and I want to join the dive club. And I'm like, okay. So people would give me all bits of kit, and I'd build. So I built my own set of regulators, and my first wetsuit was a secondhand jacket, and that was a secondhand pair of trousers and a secondhand jacket from a woman. So it balls in all the wrong places. And I was like, 12 years old and skinny as a rake. So whenever you just go and get in the North Sea, it would flush and I'd be freezing cold. But I was far hardy as a 12-year-old than I am now. So yeah, and that carried on. Then obviously in the forces, I'd go on trips, when I'd leave myself, like scuba diving, and I volunteered to go and do the army sort of dive course, and then underwater EOD for the army. And then when I left, I started developing a lot more into technical diving, so rebreathers, trimix gases, cave diving. So just so people know, trimix gas, if you at a certain depth, air becomes toxic, oxygen becomes toxic. So what we do is we breathe a mixture of trimix. It's called trimix. It's 3-gas mixture. It's helium, nitrogen, oxygen, and the ratios of those gases are dependent on how deep you want to go. So we breathe that. We use rebreathers rather than scuba gear. So a rebreather is the exact same technology that astronauts use. It recycles one breath. So you don't produce any bubbles. It's very quiet, but also you can stay underwater for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, irrespective of how deep you're going to go. And then into cave diving, which I've been doing quite a lot the last few years, is cave diving, sort of cave diving exploration.
All right, I did see on your Instagram, obviously, about when you were cave diving, but there wasn't much water when it was very muddy.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a huge kind of variation of caves, but cave diving kind of tends to take one or two forms. It's either a cave that's completely submerged, so just a cave that's completely underwater, or you got a cave that dips in and out. So a sump is an underwater passage, but it can be like a snake going up and down above and below the water table. So you might dive, and then you might surface in a completely dry chamber. Now that dry chamber is locked off, it's shut off from the outside world. You can't get there without going underwater, but you can get into a dry chamber. And then you might then dry cave through this dry chamber, carry on your dive kit to find another sump to get back in the water and dive on. So yeah, and sometimes those dry chambers can be very, very muddy because the water level might come up and down and it might wash a lot of mud in. So often the hardest bit of cave diving from that point of view is just humping what is very heavy dive kit through some pretty minging, horrible dry caves.
Where have you cave dived in the world?
All over the place. I mean, probably some of the stuff you see on Instagram, where it's really, really muddy, is in Wales. That's the thing. There's still places to explore, places where no human being has ever been, right under our feet. We've got a current project in a cave system that's under Chepstow Racecourse. So if you're willing to go underground and underwater, there's still stuff to find. But I've cave dived like France, Japan, got out in Spain, Greece. I need to get across to Mexico. I mean, I've done ice cave diving, so cave diving in a cave that's made of ice, that's in a glacier up in Greenland. So yeah, it can be fairly varied.
How did that come about? Ice diving or cave? What did you call it?
Well, ice cave diving. I suppose you call it ice cave diving. There's not really an official term for it. But basically, I was presenting along with three other people on a BBC Science series called Operation Iceberg back in 2012, which was it was part science expedition, part filming expedition. So it was the BBC along with some glaciologists from, I think, Boston, Toronto, and Cambridge universities, who were up in Greenland, and they're studying the life cycle of an iceberg. So from its kind of conception up in the start of the glacier, all the way down to the calving front of the glacier where it's effectively born, floats out to sea, and then obviously melts and dies. So we're there for a couple of months, and one of the things we did was look at blue lakes are these color-wise phenomenal colored lakes that is crystal clear glacial meltwater that forms in depressions in the pure white glacier bowls. So you imagine that the water's crystal clear and the lake bed is just white ice. So what you tend to find is that the blueness changes with depth in the shallow bits, because it was 24-hour-a-day sunlight, because it was August, we're up there. It's like bright electric kind of blue, and then kind of changed to azure blue. And then the deeper parts, it's like kind of quite inky indigo. So you fly over that in your helicopter, because the only way to get around the western Greenland is by helicopter with your dive kit. And we're looking to place cameras and certain scientific sensors in this lake. So I dived in and I planted the kit and did all that sort of behavior. And I was with Doug Allen, who's some people might recognize. He's quite a famous kind of wildlife cameraman for the BBC. Does done all your frozen planets and blue planets and all that sort of stuff. And we were in the water, and I spotted this hole in the floor. And we've been warned that these lakes can empty, cracks, basically crevasses can form as the glacier moves, which the water will then pour into with up to 10 times the power of Niagara Falls, basically down a plug hole. So I was looking at this sort of hole in the lake floor, thinking, I wonder if that's the plug hole. I'll just take a wee look. So off I swam. Obviously, Doug had no intention of following me, so I swam. But he's got footage of me swimming head first into this ice cave underwater.
Nice. Why did you feel the need to go towards the danger, as some might say?
Well,
because obviously Doug didn't want to follow you.
No, he didn't. But I mean, again, it's. Well, a couple of things. One, I think it's human curiosity. Like you want to know what's around the next corner, what's over the next hill, what's around the next bend. What's out beyond the darkness. There's that kind of, I think, instinctive curiosity that's driven human beings out of Africa and spread across the world. Really, I think we've still got that. Like that anticipation. It's why we wrap presents. We just give somebody a present. We wrap it first because there's that little sort of tantalizing kind of curiosity that it brings. But also it's worth saying that the things I do, I'm aware, seem or can appear incredibly dangerous from the outside. And I've been accused of all things like, got a death wish and you're reckless and you're adrenaline junkie and all that stuff. And none of that's true. None of it's true. I'm probably the most cautious and paranoid person you're likely to meet. That's why I'm still alive. So in terms of yes, Doug is not a cave diver or technical diver. So for Doug to go down that hole, yes, that would have been dangerous. But I've gained skills and experience over the years, so it's certainly less dangerous for me to do it. I was pretty confident I could get in and get back out. So I didn't really feel I was placing myself in danger. And it's a bit like you can drive a car, great, okay. Now, is it safe to jump on a motorbike? Well, it depends whether you can ride a motorbike or not. If you can't ride a motorbike, then no, it's very dangerous to try and ride a motorbike. But if you can ride a motorbike, then it's absolutely perfectly safe. So with a lot of these things, it's they're not necessarily as foolhardy and dangerous as perhaps they appear.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking about whether I would go in it. I'm not sure. I mean, cave diving. So I've never been around sort of people that have ever done it, and I've never done it myself. But I think I would. I'd have a go at it. I think skydiving, absolutely not.
See, I'm not saying skydiving is safer than cave diving, but certainly skydiving is far more heavily. Skydiving is probably the most heavily regulated sport in the country, near enough, because it comes under the same kind of legislation in as Heathrow does, is policed by the Civil Aviation Authority. It seems like police, Heathrow and all that sort of stuff. So for a person to jump out of a plane, there's a huge amount of paperwork and qualification and kit checks and insurances that have to be in place for that to happen. Whereas any fool can buy some dive kit off eBay and go cave diving, or climbing. Any fool can just buy some climbing kit off eBay and go and have a bash at lead climbing a multi-pitch route. So both of those things will be the last thing they do. Whereas with skydiving, because it's an airfield, it's very tightly controlled. So for me to get on that jump plane, not only is that jump plane got to be kind of in date, MOT services in docks in place, insurance in place, the pilot has to be qualified in date, his medical's got to be up to date, the airfield's got to be insured, all that stuff. The right staff have got to be in place, otherwise it won't be allowed to open. Then when I turn up, I've got to show my qualification, my logbook experience, my equipment gets checked to make sure it's all fit for purpose. My reserve parachute has to have basically an MOT certificate. It gets unpacked and repacked and checked by an advanced rigger every 6 months, etc., etc., etc. There's all these things have got to be in place for me to get on that jump plane. So, skydiving is actually a very safe thing to do.
Yeah, it's not necessarily I'm quite scared of heights, which is something I'm not. I don't know. If my old man's around, I'm not. I'll soon because I know that he'll just take the piss out of me for the rest of my life, basically. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I just think I probably would do it, but I think someone would have to. I wouldn't organise a skydiving, charity event or whatever like that. If one of my mates was doing it and said, "Oh, Jack, do you want to get on it?" I'd probably get on it. Do you know what I mean? And do it. But it's that
the heights thing. I think is kind of irrelevant, to be honest. It's a bit like looking at Google Earth. Just at 15,000 feet. Heights, kind of a fear of heights, I think is fairly irrelevant. I have jumping people who are scared of heights. They don't like, being up ladders and that sort of stuff, but they're quite happy jumping all day because it's kind of a bit abstract. You look down at the ground, it's kind of abstract. It's so far away. I mean, it is frightening at the start, no doubt about it. Even though you learn how to do it properly, you learn how safe the gear is, all this sort of stuff. The first time you jump out of a plane on your own, that little caveman at the back of your head who doesn't understand physics or engineering or how a parachute works or that sort of stuff, he is screaming at you not to jump out the plane. And it takes a lot of jumps before he shuts up. Probably took me about 100 jumps before I was like, yeah, I'm entirely cool with this. And now admittedly, I get on a jump plane and it's all pretty chilled, but that's better. Like people say, oh, is it bad once the adrenaline rush is worn off? No, I don't like adrenaline rushes. I don't really enjoy the experience. I enjoy being completely compass mentis, climbing out of an aircraft, hanging on the outside with my mates, being able to look out and enjoy the view, enjoy the experience, launch out, be in control. So the more I've jumped, the more I've enjoyed it.
How many jumps have you got?
I think about 1,200.
Oh, quite a few then.
Yeah, but it's all relative. That's the problem. Like I hang out with some of the best skydivers in the world. So they've got like thousands and thousands and thousands of jumps. So, all these things are relative. I think genuinely. I'm not so naive is to be unaware of the rest of the world, but I kind of on a certain level think I'm pretty normal and standard because of the people I hang out with. So, because my mates, like I got married last year, people there were wildlife cameramen, professional skydivers, professional cave divers, professional stuntmen, TV presenters, and none of it's a big deal. It's like, oh, cool, you're a TeamGB skydiver. Cool, I'm cave diving more regular. Oh, cool. So everyone's interested. Everyone thinks it's cool, but there's a normality to it all because everyone lives within their own little universe. I mean, a good example is when I was in the force in 4-9. So 4-9 was the bomb disposal squadron that was basically half. It was commandos and paras. So obviously a little bit of rivalry between the commandos and the paras. So everyone was always trying to be, the fittest, whichever troop was the fittest. So there's a lot of like massively motivated and very, very fit guys anyway. And I would probably been, if there's 100 guys in the squadron, I'd have been maybe, I don't know, 75th. I.e. in the sort of bottom of the top quarter for fitness. So but if you'd have asked me how fit I was back then, at the time I would have said, I'm about average. I'm kind of upper middle group. I'm above average, but I'm about average. But of course, I wasn't. I was an absolute beast, but I didn't realize because everyone around me was similarly as fit, so you kind of it's all relative, it's all comparative. So 1,200 jumps sounds like a lot to you, but my best mate in skydiving's got like, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000. So
and it's relative. Obviously, it's relative for obviously the amount of years you've been doing it as well.
Yeah.
So what about base jumping?
Not something I do much of. It's hard in the UK. There's it's another skill. There's also no redundancy. You only have one parachute, and it's the time as well to maintain those sort of skills. It's not something you can just pick up. A lot of the stuff that I do, it's why I'm my climbing. I'm not doing so much climbing now as I used to, just because I'm so busy with the filming, and then staying current in skydiving, staying current in freediving, staying current in cave diving. Requires a lot of time. So base jumping is not something that I am currently pursuing, although we've had myself and a friend of mine who's another stunt guy who does skydiving. We've had a few ideas mulling away, so I won't say never.
Oh, okay. I had a guest on a couple of episodes ago that was he was a base jumper. He just does base jumping, so I just thought I'd ask. But yeah, he said about the single parachute. And that I don't know. Base jumping is, because he was talking about I think the world record for base jumping is it's ridiculous. It's something like 17 meters, like the lowest jump ever recorded.
Yeah. That's what they go for. So they and it'll be probably a fixed. So what they do is the pilot chute, which is what you throw, which is like a mini parachute, then pulls your main parachute out. You can get somebody to hold that. So actually, it's almost like doing a static line. You're deploying straight off the exit. They're also packed differently. They're much bigger. They're almost packed like a reserve parachute. So you look at a normal skydiver's rig, their backpack, 2/3 or even 3/4 of that volume is your reserve. It's on the bottom bit, the bottom like quarter, bottom third. That's your main canopy. Most of the kind of physical space is given over to your reserve, which is no bad thing.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, as you can see, the time in the corner is counting down slowly. Do you want to do a second episode?
I'd love to.
Yeah, cool. Because I just didn't want to rush through this, and then we can do all the, we're good. So we may as well end this week's episode then, as we're inside the 5 minutes now anyway, and then we shall see everyone next week. Thanks very much for coming on. Do you want to give everyone your socials and your website?
Yeah, the website I need to update, but it's just my name, andytorbet.com. Socials, the only one, to be honest, I'd advise following me on is Instagram, which again is just Andy_Torbet, because that's the only one I actually use. But yeah, if folks want to drop me a DM on that's cool, and I'll get back to them.
All right, perfect. Well, we shall see you next week, everybody.
Fantastic. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.